Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Today we're joined by Dutch MEP Yalta Europa, Reinier van Lanschot of Yalta Europa, who returned from Ukraine, where he was a part of a delegation of MEPs attending the Yalta European Strategy conference. The delegation that aimed to reaffirm the EU's commitment to Ukraine. What were the key takeaways from his trip? How strong is European support for Ukraine in the face of evolving global dynamics? And what role can the EU play in securing Ukraine's future? We discuss these pressing issues with Reinier van Lanschot. Thank you very much for joining us, Reinier, and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. So, you've just come back from a 3-day conference. It wasn't just the conference, you had a number of events.
Yes.
Key takeaways.
I think the key takeaway for me was the determination I saw in all the Ukrainian people that I spoke to, whether it was from military experts to soldiers to women who are leading a children's center for the Ukrainian children that have been abducted by the Russian army and are sometimes retrieved. Whether it was politicians, I saw a huge determination to do what's right and to fight for freedom, democracy, and their country. And I think if I take away 10% of that determination and bring it to the European Parliament, then we can do good things as Europe.
Yeah, I want to ask about that in just a second, but you say something very interesting. The determination, it sounds like morale is still very high despite all the punishment that the Ukrainian population has undergone in the last 3 years. Is that right?
Yes, and I was there. The trip started on Monday, the commemoration of 3 years of war, the remembrance of all the fallen Ukrainian heroes. And that came just after the big betrayal from the Orange Judas across the sea. And I was expecting that to have a very negative impact on the morale, but actually the contrary was the case.
Okay, interesting. Now, in terms, because you're a defence specialist, one of the things that I wanted to ask about was, what did you see in the defence realm? Because I understand you went to a drone factory.
Yes.
And that's something, of course, the Ukrainians have perfected, the use of drones in warfare.
Yeah.
What did you learn about the way that they've adapted what they have to fight, to defend themselves?
I think the innovation in the military never goes faster than actually in times of war. So what I take away from my visit to the drone factory and the conversations that I've had is that we need to make sure as EU that when we do investments into our own defense, they need to also follow the forefront of technological innovation when it comes to military equipment. Yesterday's war is what it seems to be that we are preparing for sometimes. But drones are the number one source of casualty inflictment on Russians. Almost, I think, 8 to 9 out of 10 of the Russian casualties come from drone attacks. So drones have completely changed the way warfare is done. And that is also that we should focus on when we invest in European defense industry.
Right.
And in close cooperation with Ukraine, because that will actually help us to learn from the knowledge they have obtained in this horrible war. And that will also help our own security.
Another front on which Ukraine is battling, of course, and other countries, is that of general hybrid warfare, including the use of electronics and computers and so on. What did you find out about that? How is Ukraine defending itself against those attacks?
I think the most important thing I realized is that still in many capitals, we are still sleeping. All these hybrid attacks have been happening for years. And the Polish government seems to have woken up to that. They chose as the motto for their presidency of the European Council, Secure Europe. So they are doing the right things. But in other capitals, including my own in the Netherlands, I do not see that same urgency. But the urgency has never been higher. We are at an historic moment where after 80 years of close collaboration with the United States, who were our biggest ally and security, that has totally changed in the last month. And we need to do everything as quickly as possible to be able to defend ourselves independently of the United States.
Right, so you and the rest of your delegation taking back some very powerful information, some messages, learnt from your experience in Ukraine. What would you like to see the EU do in terms of upping its game, if you like, in terms of defence?
So there are many things that we have to do and that we actually should have done years ago, but now the urgency is higher than ever. On the 6th of March, there is a European Council meeting. All the heads of states will gather, and I think they should do 10 things that will directly help Ukraine and make sure that they can go to a peace agreement from a position of strength, and that will help our own defence industry.
Give us a flavour.
There's 10 points, but I will not go through all 10 of them. But let me give you 3. The first one is there is 200 billion, more than 200 billion of frozen Russian assets that is not being used to the full extent. Give those assets entirely to Ukraine so they can directly invest it into their own defense industry. They have more capacity, they need more finances. It's the quickest, cheapest way to improve their position on the front line. The second thing that I'm advocating for is speed up the accession process of Ukraine joining the EU. There are more things we can do as European Union to get them into the European Union as quickly as possible, and that will also serve as a security guarantee. The third thing that I think is absolutely necessary, we need to borrow money together, just like we have done during COVID. Euro bonds, they are called. Borrow 500 billion euros and invest them into our own defense and make that defense as integrated as possible. Move towards a European army and use that money for it. I think the urgency is so high that these measures need to be taken, and I hope that they will be taken on the 6th of March.
So you're advocating a European army, an EU army?
Yes.
Yes.
It will take decades to get there, but and I don't think we should get too caught up in the conversation of what the end state of that army should be, because we know that prior to that there are steps that almost everybody agrees on. Borrow the money together and buy military equipment together. We now have 15 different systems that cannot communicate with each other when it comes to, for example, communication or different ammunition that, even though it's the same size, doesn't fit in the system of other countries. That needs to stop. We have been, as European Union, stuck in a nationalistic tunnel. We think primarily from within our member states, and that is now becoming a security threat. So I'm part of Volt. Volt is a European movement. It was founded in 2017 with the idea to be the first political movement that is active in all EU member states, and with the idea to change the way that Europe works. We also have a chapter here in Poland, actually. It's growing quite fast, so if anybody feels like joining this new political movement, feel free to give me to write me a message. But why am I saying this? Because it is time for Europe to unite and to become stronger. And I think Volt is the political movement that drives that change.
Well, there are some countries that are setting the pace, aren't they? I'm thinking, of course, of Poland, whose defence spending is far larger as a percentage of GDP than most other, in fact, all other EU countries. What is stopping other countries from following suit? In fact, some people haven't even reached the 2% minimum for NATO.
Yes, so there's countries like Spain and Belgium that are far behind. There are some countries that are catching up, so it is improving. It has to do a lot with those national contexts. Some countries don't feel the urgency as high enough, and I think that's problematic. I would prefer that every country reaches the 2% and more, 3 to 4% by themselves. There are talks that we should change the Maastricht Treaty. It was a treaty in which we said there is a maximum amount that you can spend more than 3% more than your yearly budget is the maximum you can spend. The European Union now says, let's remove those hurdles so that countries like Spain with a higher debt can actually increase their defense spending as well. That is good, but that by itself is not enough. That's why I'm advocating for these Euro bonds collectively borrowing money and collectively buying things.
So everyone's got a stake in the game.
Yes. And did you know that we only get 70% of the equipment that we could get if we would pool our resources?
Yes, well,
and
there is that.
Yeah, so we would get so much more bang for our buck.
Well, I look forward to seeing that happen, but thank you so much for sharing your experience and expertise with our audience. Reinier van Lanschot, bye-bye.
Thank you.
And from us at World Talks, it's also goodbye.